This is The Language of Business, a show to inform and inspire entrepreneurs and anyone thinking about a startup. Hear about strategies that work and strategies that often don't work from people who've been there and done that. Our host is Gregory Stoller, Harvard MBA and Senior Lecturer at Boston University Questrom School of Business. Here's Greg Stoller.
These days, when you mention the word cannabis, enterprising entrepreneurs sniff profit. But what happens to all of that research? We're on location here in Worcester with CEO Dr. Mary McNabb of C3RN, and welcome to The Language of Business.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So what does C3RN stand for?
Yeah, it stands for Cannabis Community Care and Research Network.
And what is your charter?
So our mission is to advance science, research, and education around medical and adult use cannabis.
Most entrepreneurs these days immediately want to make money and make profits. It's even better than just revenues from cannabis. What do you do with your research?
Research studies that we have right now are with the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. We launched a cannabis consumer and patient study. That study has around 2,000 responses so far to date. And the purpose of that study is really to drive awareness around cannabis, both medical and adult use cannabis, really from an advocacy standpoint and also just from an awareness standpoint for the public and for our local dispensary partners.
What do you think consumers use the research for?
A lot of the consumers have been really interested to understand where are the different types of cannabis, like what are the different ways that you can consume cannabis, what are the most popular, what are popular strains for different conditions, or you want to relax, or you want to be alert. So consumers are really seeking that level of information and education. I think there's a real lack of good, solid, quality education out there for both consumers, patients, also businesses and healthcare providers around the different scientific aspects of cannabis.
And how are you funded?
That's a great question. We have no investment funding. We originally won the first Boston University Cannabis Startup Competition 2 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We used that award funding to launch a event series last year. And so our revenue has come from sponsorships and partnerships with different dispensaries. I think what's difficult for researchers in cannabis, and any researcher out there I'm sure agree with me, there's a dearth of funding available for cannabis research. The majority of funding that's available through traditional U.S. government funding streams is through the National Institute of Drug Abuse. And so that research tends to have research objectives that are looking at the potential harms or prevention measures. So when looking at the other side of sort of the health and medical research coin, there hasn't been funding available or lessened regulatory restrictions for researchers to conduct other studies. So we've had to be very creative as entrepreneurs over the last 2 years. I think companies have seen research as important, but research is not cheap.
Sure.
And a lot of these companies are seeing data and analytics from a very different perspective. So it's been a dance of trying to work with an industry who's growing to understand the value of investing in such data. So for the last, I would say about a year and a half or so, we were able to really work with a few really great industry partners to kind of make that happen and to fund it from a smaller, more bite-sized perspective. Sure. But that also requires collaboration among dispensaries. So it's been really interesting.
What is your end game?
So our end game is to advance really good quality science, research, data, analytics, be a service to the business community, but also really start to hone in on high quality educational content for the cannabis industry, future entrepreneurs, workforce, as well as healthcare providers, policymakers, et cetera. Our end game is to make sure that the public is better educated about the benefits of cannabis and stigmas reduced.
And what would you consider to be a win? Would you want to go into permanent partnership? Would you want to get purchased? Would you want to end up in it as a university division?
I think where we'd want to end up is two ways. One, really making institutional impact with several educational institutions. We have a nonprofit that we've established that is looking at those health-related research and that education from a positive benefit. But I think from our perspective, we're a public benefit corporation, a B Corp. So we're excited about that standing. And I think for us, we'd like to eventually grow our company to really focus on data analytics and education and eventually sell.
If you could invest in one aspect of the cannabis or CBD industry these days, where would it be?
So there's lots of opportunities in this industry, both plant touching and non-plant touching. Plant touching side investments, I think it's riskier to invest in plant touching businesses just because regulations change, it's a higher investment cost, capital building, et cetera, for some of these plant touching license types. So my advice to an investor would really be to look to the ancillary industries, the non-plant touching supportive industries. So things like research or data and analytics like C3RN, or legal firms, business accounting, HR, other ancillary services from labeling, label products to eco-friendly packaging. Those are all less risky investments. And think about like the gold rush, right? The things that lasted till the end of the gold rush were the picks and shovels and the Levi's jeans.
Dr. McNabb, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mary McNabb, CEO of C3RN, the Cannabis Community Care and Research Network.
Big choices after college, right? Grad school, maybe? Soar from your undergraduate major to a great career in business. Biomedical engineer to healthcare analyst. Health science to clinical systems analyst. Mechanical engineer to solutions engineer. Before you know it, you can have a master's degree in management studies. 9 months and you're in business.
When it comes to running a company, having gray hair is usually a term of endearment. But is that the case with a new industry like cannabis or CBD? We're on location virtually with Jeremy Bromberg, who's the COO of Canwell LLC in Rhode Island, and welcome to the Language of Business.
It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Jeremy, does having gray hair help or hurt you as a senior executive?
Well, I spared no expense to get it, so it's clearly something I think is important. But no, I think in the end, it is a help. There's certainly going to be those who just go, old guy, no way. But on the other hand, I'm someone who has a lot of business management experience. I know how to build companies. I know how to run them. And in the cannabis industry, it's a new industry, but there are a lot of people in it who don't have that experience. They know more about cannabis, or they're simply willing to take a risk on something new. But fortunately, there are some, and I happen to be fortunate enough to find them, who say, look, what you know about how businesses run can help us be different, can help us be better than a lot of the competition.
Why did you choose Canwell, or more importantly, why did they choose you?
Both. Canwell, when I joined, was early stage as what would be called a multi-state operator. Had this operating facility in Rhode Island, and had a company that we are building in Massachusetts. The idea of working on a portfolio approach was very appealing to me. The idea that there was one company that we looked at how to improve and another one that how we build is very intriguing to me. And the opportunity to help put those teams in place to build that new company and put the team in place that's going to lead it into greater success is something I enjoy doing, figuring out what the pieces are, who the right people are, starting to get the processes in place, and then letting them have something to run with.
So much of this industry is highly regulated. Are any of the regs the same between Massachusetts and Rhode Island?
When you try to do multi-state, every state is different. It is heavily regulated everywhere, but no one has decided on the standard regs that should apply cross-country. So, I mean, for example, Massachusetts, if you have a medical card, you can go to a medical dispensary in Massachusetts. If you have a Massachusetts medical card, that's it. In Rhode Island, if you have a medical card from anywhere, you can go to a dispensary and buy. So Massachusetts will restrict the medical market far more than Rhode Island does. But Massachusetts now has an adult use market, whereas Rhode Island does not.
Do you think the state regulations are going to affect what you do with the company, in that most of these new businesses either want to be bundled up and sold off or going IPO? What are your thoughts on sort of the intersection of regulation and business?
Some of the people who would acquire or invest kind of like the stronger regulation, because it makes it harder for companies to get in to that marketplace. And so if you're in on one, you have a leg up. So in some sense, the restrictive market is appealing to investors. So on the other hand, is it a challenge for the business? Yes, because we have to meet all these requirements, and some of them, frankly, to us do not make sense. well-intentioned. I'm not criticizing, and it's early still for the industry. Even regulations are a startup. So it's all coming in place. It can be painful, but it can be beneficial, and it simply is a fact of life.
What do you think your management team would define as a home run, or better, as a grand slam?
There's a chance to differentiate yourself in this market. The market is right now very homogeneous in many ways, especially around the products. So if you have a chance to get out and do something a bit different and stand out, then you can really set yourself apart and see great results.
For a company that wants to enter the industry, what aspect of the industry do you think is going to have the highest potential for success?
Certainly in the Northeast, flower is the bigger seller because that's what folks are used to. But edibles, concentrates, other products are moving up.
For a company that wants to break into this industry, what single piece of advice would you have for them right now?
Find someone with a lot of money. These businesses, especially in the Northeast, are very expensive to start up. I mean, there was a statement I saw recently that was absolutely true. You're a year or two in permitting, and part of permitting often means holding a lease option on a property. So you're paying rent on something and you don't know if or when you're going to get approved to grow. So it's not for the faint of heart. If you want to build a medical facility, which is by law has to be fully vertically integrated, in other words, cultivation, extraction, processing, infusion, and dispensary sales. If you're going to do that, it's 8 figures to get started. If you aim for a piece of the adult use market, there you can just do a retail store. You can just do an extraction business or a test business or a grow business. Those become somewhat less. If you're doing a grow business, that will still be a lot of money. But a store, you'll have the build out costs for the store, which are certainly not as big as a grow facility by any stretch. And then you also will need money to stock your store initially with products. So I would say the key thing is going to be money. And then the second thing will probably be connections. So how you can get situated and sited is one of the next big hurdles.
Jeremy, thank you very much.
Greg, I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Jeremy Bromberg, the COO of Canwell LLC out of Rhode Island. Cannabis and CBD are all of the rage today, but how do you go from farm to table? We're on location in Salem, Massachusetts on the North Shore with Mark Zaturka, the co-founder of INSA, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Hi, thanks for having me.
What does INSA mean?
INSA, divided in half, is indica and sativa, which is the 2 main categories of cannabis that most people know about. Sativa being more energizing and indica being more relaxing.
This Salem location is certainly not one of your first. How many have you opened so far?
So this is our 4th licensed dispensary in the state of Massachusetts, our 3rd location.
And the Commonwealth allows you to have 3 and 3, 3 for medicinal and 3 for recreational, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Is that your plan over the long term?
Yeah, we're going to look to probably maximize our footprint here in the state. This will be our 2nd adult use dispensary, and we hope to open a 3rd as well.
And how do the economics work? To get one of these stores open, what is the timeline?
It takes about anywhere from 12 to 24 months, probably from the initial starting point of trying to open a new location to the point where you're finally open. So there's a lot of red tape, working with the state to get an application approved, and then working with the city to get a community host agreement, a special permit, and then the build out itself, and then hiring and training your staff. So it's a pretty involved process. It's an expensive process, and you need to make sure you get things right. Mistakes are inevitable.
Sure.
So how you learn from those is what's important.
What is a typical break even in terms of months or years?
Right now, it's probably within the first year. I think this industry is still in the honeymoon stage. Things are changing as more and more licenses are approved, but right now things are moving really fast and are exciting right now in this industry.
So a store like Salem could potentially be profitable a year from now?
Yeah.
And how did you find Salem?
Well, we're looking at multiple cities. Earlier on, we realized how expensive and timely it is to get one of these licenses, and so we really wanted to find communities that were welcoming to us. So we talked to other communities where we had pushback from the municipalities or from the community. Salem was looking for operators. We really enjoyed working with the mayor and the police chief and the local neighborhood associations, so we just thought this was a great fit.
And what would you say your competitive advantage is going to be, since there's going to be more than one here in Salem?
For us, we rely on amazing, knowledgeable staff members to help our customers and quality products. So we have our own cultivation, our own lab, our own kitchen where we produce and grow and process all of our own products. We consider them some of the best of the state. We really pride ourselves on providing premium products. And then just the experience that people have when they come to one of our facilities. We really want it to be top-notch. They get one-on-one concierge service. We walk them through. We try to figure out what they're looking to get out of using cannabis and guide them to the product that's best for them.
What is the difference between CBD, hemp oil, and regular flowers?
So yeah, the difference between the CBD products that you can buy here at the dispensary versus what you can buy in the stores or online is that our CBD products are cannabis-derived, while those products are hemp-derived. Really the only difference is hemp-derived products are 0.3% THC or less. So you really can't get any psychoactive effect off of those. But consumers do have to be careful. There's been a lot of studies done that shown the CBD products that you buy outside of dispensaries aren't tested by a third party, and a lot of them have less than the milligrams that they say on the packaging. So you just want to make sure you get it from a reputable brand or come to a dispensary.
Mark, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Mark Shaturka, co-founder of the INSA Salem Marijuana Dispensary.
Are you a problem solver? Do you see the big picture and the small details? Want to turn big data into big decisions? Take AI to the boardroom. Translate rocket science into the science of business? Build your career at digital speed with a Master of Science in Business Analytics. Be ready for careers like analytics consultant, data science, analytics strategist, data translator, BI analyst, technical business analyst. 10 months and you're in business analytics.
Cannabis is all about money, but what happens when government and big business collide? We're on location at the Cannabis Control Commission here in Boston with Commissioner Steve Hoffman, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Nice to be here, thank you.
How does one become the chairman of the Cannabis Control Commission?
I think it's just my good luck, I guess. So the way this worked is that the law created a 5-person independent commission jointly appointed by the governor, the treasurer, and the attorney general. There were 5 commissioners, and each of us had different backgrounds, or were required to have different backgrounds. The attorney general appointed somebody that had a public safety background. The governor appointed somebody that had a public health background. The 3 of them, governor, attorney general, and treasurer, jointly appointed 2 other commissioners, one that had a regulated industry background and one that had a social justice background. The treasurer got to appoint the chairperson, and the chairperson had to have a business and startup background. How she called me and found me, I still to this day don't know, but she called and said, you know, I got this interesting job. Are you interested? And I said, not in a million years. And she said, well, look, you know, just think about it, because this is pretty unique. And I said, okay, I'll think about it. I went home that night and I said to my wife, I said, babe, you'll never guess what I heard about today, but I'm not doing it. And she said, and I'm taking out some of the swear words.
Of course.
She said, are you crazy? This is the adventure of a lifetime. How could you not do it? And here I am.
Was there any magic to the beginning of your term in September of 2017?
I don't know that I'd use the word magic. I would use the word terror. We got appointed September 1st of 2017. We had no staff, we had no money, and we had no office. But there was legislation that had some very, very explicit and quick mandates. So we had to have our initial regulations done by March 15th. We had to start of 2018, so literally 4 months or 6 months after we started, we had to start accepting license applications on April 1st. We couldn't approve applications until June 1st, but it literally was just nonstop. And again, there was no instruction manual, there's no roadmap, thank God. There were a couple states like Colorado and Oregon and Washington that went before us, and we learned a lot from them. They were incredibly helpful, but each state is different. The law is different in each state. The demographics are different. So we got some help from those guys, but we literally couldn't lift and shift. We had to do it ourselves. And it was terrifying, and particularly for someone like myself who had no public sector experience at all, had no experience working with the media and the press. It was terrifying. I mean, it was exhilarating. I was as energized as I've ever been in my professional career, but it was terrifying.
To what extent has your rich business history, especially as a consultant, either helped or hindered you in the past couple of years?
Oh, I think it's helped because, basically this is a startup, and it's a gigantic startup, and it's starting up an industry, not just an individual company. It's also a startup that's being done completely in the open, with a lot of interested parties, commenting on every step along the way. But it is a startup, and when you do a startup, you recognize, that you've got to just kind of roll up your sleeves and do it, and job descriptions and job type, everybody just pitches in to make it work, and building an agency from scratch, standing up an industry from scratch, I think my experience doing startups was extraordinarily helpful.
But most startups pride themselves on speed and being nimble, etc.
Yeah.
Can a government agency be either nimble or speedy?
I think that there are constraints, so you probably couldn't compare us in terms of nimbleness and speediness with a private sector startup, but I think compared to other government agencies, I'm actually pretty proud of our track record, and I think we have been nimble and we have been quick, and I think, again, part of it is, when you start with 5 people and no staff and no money, I am really grateful to the other commissioners and myself. We just, I said, rolled up our sleeves and just said, what do we need to do? We assigned, divvied up the tasks, and we just got started. And while we have been criticized for how long it's taken, when I look at other states, when I look at the startup of medical marijuana in this state, or the startup of the gaming commission and the casino licensing, we've been pretty quick.
What are your thoughts on quality versus quantity, number of locations versus the profitability of those individual locations?
Yeah, I mean, I want this to be a successful industry, but I'm not rooting for any one participant. I just want the industry to be stable. I want people to be able to make a good living on it. So I wouldn't say we're focused on the profitability of any particular enterprise. We are, as I said, focused on a stable industry. We said from day one, the 5 commissioners said, we're going to get this right, we're going to do it right, and that has always been the operative objective. So we really don't have any kind of speed targets or any kind of quantitative, how many stores do we want to open by a certain period of time. We just want this to work for the citizens of the state. We want this to be right, and that's been kind of our mantra the entire way.
Looking at other states in comparison with Massachusetts, how would you rate Massachusetts' success so far on a 1 to 10 scale?
Probably an 8. I mean, I don't think we've been perfect, but I do think we've avoided 2 kinds of mistakes. I mean, one is the states of procedures. I feel really bad. As terrified as I was, I can only imagine what it was like to have had my job in Colorado.
Right.
Because they had nothing.
Right. They had
nothing to look at.
No other reference point.
So I think they did a phenomenal job, but they've been incredibly open with us about saying, here's some things that we wish we could have done differently or better if we had another chance. And we learned from some of the mistakes of Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, and I think we, for the most part, avoided them. There were other states that went legal at the same time we did, California, Nevada, Alaska, and Maine, I think, if I have that correct. And I think we've done a better job. And respectfully, they've had their own challenges. Again, each state, each set of laws is different, so I'm not being critical. But they did some things that we chose not to do. California kind of opened the doors day one, January 1st, and they just opened the doors and had hundreds of stores. They didn't have a licensing system in place at that point. They did not have a seed-to-sale inventory tracking system in place. And we said, we're not doing it until we're ready. So we're, we didn't do it as fast as California. I think we did it better.
What do you believe is the single biggest area that could derail either the store's success or your success from a commission?
I think the federal prohibition is a heavy weight that we're bearing. I think it has a specific consequence in that banks are very leery of entering the industry, as I would be if I was the CEO of a bank. I'm not sure that I'd want to enter this industry when, Now, the fact of the matter is that the federal government has never taken action against a state-licensed marijuana establishment, nor banks servicing the industry. No guarantee they won't, but they have not to this point. But I completely understand the reticence of banks to participate in this industry. And that is a problem in 2 respects. One is just from a public safety standpoint. You've got a cash business. You've got people that are walking out the front of their stores, locking it up at 9 o'clock at night with a satchel, $50,000 of cash over their
literally,
shoulder, and every criminal in the state knowing that.
Right.
Now we have 3 banks that have decided to participate. So on our current scale, we're fine. There are banks that are handling cash for all of our establishments, but as we expand the number of establishments, we need more banks, and that's a real problem because of the federal prohibition.
Steve, thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure.
Commissioner Steve Hoffman, Chairman of the Cannabis Control Commission here in Boston.
Support for the Language of Business is from Boston University Questrom School of Business. We're also available as a podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for watching.